Good morning. We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order of the TRPA Operations and Governance Committee. The day is Wednesday, it's November 20th, and the time is 9:05 in the morning. Maria, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Aguilar,
Here.
Mr. Bass,
Here.
Ms. Gustafson,
Here.
Ms. Hill, Ms. Lane,
I'm here.
and Mr. Rice. Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Excellent. We'll go ahead and go over the remote and in-person meeting rules for the day. For the members of the public who are joining us remotely, to observe the meeting, go to trpa.gov. Under the calendar, click on Governing Board Hybrid Meeting for November 20th. There you will find a link to the public webinar hosted on Zoom. To address committee members directly with your comments, raise your hand in Zoom by clicking Raise Hand at the bottom of your screen at the appropriate agenda item. With your hand raised, you will be unmuted by TRPA staff and have 3 minutes to address the committee. If you have used the dial-in numbers to join us by telephone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand and be unmuted. For items that are agendized as information only, we will hear public comment during the general public comment period at the end of the meeting. Comments on agenda items for action or possible action, we will hear public comment before the committee takes action. To remote committee members, if you wish to speak, you can also raise your hand in Zoom. You will find the hand icon on the bottom of your screen. Remote committee members may not use the chat box to make any comments or to have sidebar conversations. Please, everyone, remember to mute your mics unless speaking to cut down on background noise. And finally, I would like to ask that all remote members turn on their cameras if they are able to. Members of the public who have joined us in person, please raise your hand at the appropriate time for public comment and you will be called on to speak in front of the room. Committee members who are in person, please raise your hand if you wish to comment and clearly speak into the microphone in front of you. Let's go on to approval of the agenda. Staff, are there any changes to the agenda?
No changes.
Thank you. Committee members, are there any changes to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and deem the agenda approved as posted. We're now on agenda item number 2, approval of the minutes. We have draft minutes of October 23rd on page 9 of your packets. Does any member of the committee wish to make a change? Seeing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Are there any objections to the motion? Maria, do we need to vote on the voice vote? Please, Maria. Oh, voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes. This brings us to item number 3, discussion and possible recommendation for approval of the October financials. This item can be found on page 61 of your packet. Mr. Cox.
Great. Good morning.
Morning.
So today we'll be focused on the financials from October year to date for fiscal year 2024. Before we jump into that, we have had continued discussions with both states as we're preparing for the next round of budgets. The fiscal year 26 budget in California and the state fiscal year 26-27 biennium with the state of Nevada. Good progress with California on getting our BCP, which is basically a budget change for salary adjustments. They've decided to include that in the governor's January budget. So I do believe all BCPs were effectively rejected a couple months ago, but they have worked to include ours in the January budget. So still more to come, but that's positive traction. On the Nevada side, we've been working with our legislative liaison, Justin Luna, to ensure that our baseline that we've currently are funded at from the state of Nevada continues for the next biennium. And we're also working through trying to put that AB 522 salary increase that we go to get specific appropriations for, trying to get that into the baseline so we don't have to go re-ask every year. So we'll see where that lands, but continued discussions and it's been positive so far as we're working through that. So jumping over to the financials, on the revenue side, we're at 36% of budget. Planning fees are ahead of prior year, roughly 126% of the prior year. And we have gotten our first quarter's grant invoicing in, which I communicated last month that we would be working on. Expenditures are at 18% of the budget, which is driven by comp at 30 and contracts at 11% of budget. So let's jump over to the next page and I'll get into a little more detail on the revenue. So the state revenues are in, except for the Nevada AB 522 salary increases. We got to go and ask for that at some point here this fiscal year. And that'll make up the remainder of the state revenue. On the grants front, we invoiced around $250,000 in the month of October. So we're still got a long way to go on grants. I will admit we are a little bit behind from a finance perspective. We had transition in an open position the first quarter. We have that position filled and the team is working to transition. We'll get back up to speed. So some of the reason we're behind here is both invoicing, but also the way that grants ramp throughout the year. I have no concern, but I was hoping that would have ticked up a little bit higher for the first quarter. On the fees front, we are in good shape for the year. I explained already that the planning fees are ahead of prior year, so no concerns on the fees budget and how we are year to date. Local revenues were invoiced this month in October, so that's complete for the year. And then the other big one here is the other revenue, which is associated with our investment income, and that's on track as we'd expect. Y'all have questions on the revenue front?
Any questions of Mr. Cox at this point?
Okay, let's jump over to expenses. Compensation is on budget as anticipated. Like I said, we had filled that one open staff position in October, and so we're tracking back towards budget. Contracts is at 11%. This is behind this. This does ramp with grants. So a lot of what's spent here from a contracts perspective is the general fund stuff to keep the agency going. Things like we work through our snow removal contract, for example, in the last month. And thankfully we got that squared away because we had them plowed a lot last week. From a financing perspective, we'll pay there's two debt payments or interest payments. One is in December, one is in April. So that actually just went through for approval to make sure we meet the December timeline. So you'll see that step up in the December financials. And then finally on the other bucket there, it's a pretty big number and it's on track. Those are things like the firewall that we're working to replace. You've seen this meeting drop a couple times. That should be coming through next week. That's things like property taxes, agency travel, et cetera. So that's on track versus how we'd expect, and things are looking good. So overall, expenses are under revenue, which is typically how we would see the year play out for the agency, since those state funds come in at the beginning and we spend those down throughout the fiscal year. Do y'all have any questions on the expenses? Okay, jumping over to the next slide, which is the final slide. Our cumulative cash flow through October is $6.8 million. This is down around $800K from $859K from last month. Once again, that's how we're spending down those appropriations. There have been quite a bit of mitigation funds approved, but very minimal have been dispersed at this point. So we're looking to make sure that those approved funds come back and we get those paid out. So roughly $1.2 million of mitigation disbursements have been approved, and like I said, about 129 have actually been dispersed at this point through the year. So more to come on those. And once again, the cash flow is as expected. We'll continue to spend that down to zero by the end of the fiscal. Questions?
Any questions of Mr. Cox at this point? No, seeing none.
Great, thank you.
Continue on.
That's all. That concludes my report on the October income, expenses, and cash flow. So with that, jump to well, I guess what's the next step here? Is there a motion? Oh, cool.
Yeah, we'll take any questions from the committee. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and open this up to public comment. Are there any members in the room that would like to address the committee on this item? Seeing none, we'll go online.
Madam Chair, there are no hands raised to make public comment.
Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and close public comment and we'll bring this back to the committee for any further comments or a motion to approve. Is this information only, or do we need to take action on this? I think we need to recommend to accept. So if there would be a motion to do that. Mr. Aguilar,
Motion to approve?
thank you. There's a motion. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Aguilar,
Yes.
Mr. Bass,
Yes.
Ms. Hill, Ms. Gustafson,
Yes.
Mr. Rice, Ms. Lane.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to our next item, which is agenda item number 4. This can be found in your packet on page 81. And this will include an update on TRPA's investment policy. Mr. Cox.
Thank you. So the TRPA investment policy, it sets the standards by which we invest the agency funds. These funds include working capital, agency security deposits or project security deposits, as well as mitigation funds. So all those funds come together, and as stewards of those funds, we want to follow a policy in how we invest those. The operations committee, that's us here, we review our investments on a quarterly basis through the treasurer's report. So you've seen those each quarter. And the current policy that we've been operating by was last approved in January of 2019. Looking back, roughly every 5 years, we've reviewed the policy and updated it accordingly or as necessary. Since 2019, there have been some small changes in the California local agency investment guidelines. What we do is we look at the Nevada guidelines and the California guidelines, and we take the stricter of the two. From a California perspective, there were 2 small changes in investment instruments in the way that you could, both the amount you could invest and then also how, like, the maturity of those investments. The 2 changes are with regards to bankers' acceptances, which are basically a way to pay for a purchase without borrowing money. They don't pay interest, and TRPA does not use these. But we wanted to ensure our policy reflected California's policy, and that is to basically change the maturity or the potential length of time on those to shorten them and to align that with California. The second change is around negotiable certificates of deposit. So a CD typically matures over time. A negotiable CD is something that you could take back to market and sell. Also, TRPA does not use these instruments historically, but we wanted to align with California. There was a max amount historically of 20% that California said we could increase to a 30% of total investment. So we're just aligning with California's policies or California's agency investment guidelines in our policy. The final change that we made in this version is to add some terms into our glossary. So there's a group that we used called the Association of Public Treasurers of the United States and Canada. They've reviewed our policy and certified this policy. And as part of that, they give us kind of a guideline of, hey, here's how a policy could look. They had added some terms to their kind of framework. So we added a few more terms into our policy. So pretty administrative in nature, these changes, but we did want them to align And this will set us up to follow this policy here for the coming years. Once again, these don't impact how we're investing today, but thought it was important to align with the California Local Agency Investment Guidelines. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
All right, and could we please note for the record that Mr. Bass joined us in person at 9:18 a.m. this morning. Good morning, Mr. Bass. Thank you for being here. Are there any questions or comments from the committee of Mr. Cox on this investment policy? No? Okay, seeing none. We'll go ahead and ask if there's any public comment on this item. Are there any members of the public in the room that would like to comment on the investment policy? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and go online.
Madam Chair, there's no public comment online.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and bring this back to the committee then for additional comments or a motion to approve the investment policy updates.
I do have one question. I
Please.
apologize.
No, that's fine.
On the investment committee / treasurer, you're recommending a member of the board of the governing board. You've changed the language from a member of the ops committee to just a member of the board. And who is that right now? Is that?
Sorry, I don't follow.
The investment committee / treasurer. The investment committee is comprised of one
Oh,
member
sorry.
of the TRPA governing board.
Yeah, so Shelley
Okay.
today is who, so when I communicate the treasurer's report on a monthly basis, so I provide an info item to Brooke as
Okay.
the leader of this committee, and
So
Shelley.
Shelley takes.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm sorry that I.
Oh, no, that's a good question. I
that.
just wasn't following. Yeah, I didn't articulate it there. And then obviously we keep Kathy in the loop as well as our controller.
Great.
Yep.
Great. Yeah, but just as far as a governing
Yeah.
board member, I didn't remember who we
Yep.
had sitting there, whether it was Brooke or someone else. Okay.
Right.
Yep.
Right, good
That was
question.
my
Great
only
question.
question. And
Thank
I'm
you.
happy to move approval.
Thank you. There's a motion. Is there any further comment? Okay, seeing none. Can we do a voice vote since we're all in the room now? Still want to do roll
Yeah.
call? Okay,
Yes,
Mario,
please.
please roll call vote.
Mr. Bass,
Yes.
Mr. Aguilar,
Yes.
Ms. Gustafson,
Yes.
Ms. Hill, Mr. Rice, and Ms. Lane.
Yes,
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and ask Mr. Cox to bring us up to speed on agenda item number 5, which is upcoming topics.
Great. I've got 3 upcoming and then a question for y'all. So for December, I believe we're still on track to do a public records request discussion as part of this operations committee. Then in December or January is when we're going to go through our fiscal year 24 audit. It's looking more like January. We're still providing a few more bits of information to our auditors, which will then work through the final financial statements. The staff has done a fantastic job of working through what's called the management discussion and analysis. So they've been providing that insight. That's the narrative that goes along with our audit. So we've got great input there. We just need to pull it all together. And the question is will we be able to get it done between now and the early meeting in December, with being able to obviously publish that in time before the meeting. So it'll either be, we're shooting still for December, but it may shoot over to January. Yep. And then also in January, we'll have the AIS fee discussion. One question I had for this group is it looked like historically, as I went back through agendas, we'd had Bruce from Principal. Principal's our investment advisor. Bruce is our investment advisor. He would typically come on an annual basis and give an update. I don't know if there's an appetite to have that now, if annually is the right time frame, and what you as an ops committee would like to see from them. And if so, I can get something on the schedule. Just a matter of, is that an interesting topic to us? We have roughly a third of our overall cash balance with Principal. It's pretty basic. It's mostly in, as we discussed in the treasurer's report, it's mostly treasuries and a small bit into corporate securities. Not much has changed, but I'm happy to invite Bruce in and he can talk to us if it'd be valuable.
Okay, what is the committee's desire with regards to having that discussion in person annually, or do we need it every 2 years? What's your thought? I remember we've had him here before and there haven't been a lot of questions. There's general comfort that, we're doing the right thing. And so I don't know if it's a great use of his time. Maybe we do it every other year.
What I think would,
Just to check
yeah,
it.
what I think would be interesting as well is, as things change, as interest rates, I mean, we've been pretty consistent here for a bit. I think we're seeing interest rates start to decline. So I think as we see those go down, it may be a more interesting time to have him to figure out what else can we do with our funds. Right now, we're mostly in treasuries. So is there another approach? Maybe we could have him come and present other ideas within our existing investment policy framework, but I don't know if we're quite at that
There yet.
point,
Right.
where it'd be valuable, but
Right. Mr. Aguilar,
What is the total funds under management? Sorry, I should know that.
17 million out of roughly 30, between 30 and 37, depending on the time of the year.
I don't think he needs to come in person, but if he could annually do a Zoom, just
Okay.
to give us some context around the funds, even if we don't ask questions, I think having a perspective from him is important.
Okay. Great. I will work with him and we'll get something scheduled at a time where we've got a lull, in terms of schedule. So
great. Yeah,
Thanks.
seeing consensus on that. Lots of head nods.
thank you.
So there you
Thanks
go.
for the input.
Yes. Committee members, do you have any further questions regarding upcoming topics? Okay, then that was an information only item. So we'll go ahead and move to item number 6, which is committee member comments. Are there any committee members that have comments at this time? No? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to our final matter of business, which is our general public interest comment period. Any member of the public wishing to address the Operations and Governance Committee on any item listed or not listed on the agenda may do so at this time. Are there any members of the public that would like to address the committee? Sir? And would you please hit the button? There you go.
Am I good?
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Deepak Sharma. My family owns a few businesses in South Lake Tahoe. And they are in the commercial corridor. You are all been here so for a while. So if you drive up and down the commercial corridors of the basin and South Lake Tahoe in particular, you see the picture is not very pretty. This corridor has been struggling to survive. This commercial corridor has been deprived of business in the name of one or the other thing, due to one policy or another, due to one business unfriendly agenda or another. So the net result is dilapidation that you see all around Tahoe Basin's commercial corridor. I'm not talking about the big houses in the residential area, the commercial corridor. These commercial corridors have been struggling. They are no different than a person trying to breathe while his oxygen supply has been throttled. And, I don't know if it is the right time, but you have some amendments that you need to discuss later on. So I'm just going to add that. So there are some amendments to the Tahoe area plan for South Lake Tahoe. They've already gone through 2 years process or something like that. And they're coming to you for review. Now, for those plans along the way, there have been different groups that brought in their own agenda. None of it is to support the business. There were attempts to further throttle the oxygen supply, not to shut it off completely, but just enough the business die. You guys have been talking about investments and whatnot, so you know it very well. You don't have to completely shut off the oxygen. The person will die, even if there is some oxygen in there. And this is the extent of unfriendliness towards the business in this basin. Well, luckily so far, the wise minds prevailed and have managed to keep the policy changes that are coming in South Lake Tahoe to be slightly in favor of business. Not a whole lot, but it's a tiny bit of improvement, a baby step. For a small town, South Lake Tahoe, we have 2 opportunity zones in South Lake Tahoe. Opportunity zones are defined as an area where the average poverty rate is 26.4%, compared to the national poverty rate average of 13.4. So that means most of the South Lake Tahoe is 2 times poorer than the national average. I don't know where the Tahoe pride comes into that, but it is a poor area for most part. These commercial corridors, they need billions and billions of dollars of investment to revitalize it. Something that can offer decent jobs to the community that lives here. But your policies have not been working. They have been in place for decades, and they have made really very difficult for business to operate here. We need to do more to somehow bring the business back here, especially given how far it's gone back to attract all that investment. However, taking the policy instead of in the positive direction, take it back, it's not gonna bring you more investment here. It already didn't bring. If you're gonna take the policy even further back, it's not gonna help. The amendments that you're gonna discuss later today came about 2 years or so of already process while people are waiting for them to settle. I don't know how much it cost in terms of investment opportunity lost. Anyhow, the way Tahoe is, no business here is printing money. They're just here to survive somehow. The policies here have assured that, at the very best you can do is survive. We're hoping what South Lake Tahoe is doing, a slight amendment to the area plan that is a small incentive for some businesses to come and invest here. And we're not talking about anybody getting filthy rich here. We're talking about releasing tiny bit of oxygen so a person can breathe slightly better. It's nowhere near normal. We request this board and the commission to support whatever slight incentives that area plan amendments are bringing, to support them. This area has been neglected for decades. Your policy have been in place for decades, and you can drive up and down. I don't have to talk. You can see the dilapidation all over. If you take the policy backward, it's not gonna help. The
Mr.
current-
Sumer,
Okay,
sir,
yes.
I very much appreciate your comments. You'll also have another opportunity to address the board on this item if you'd like. We typically allow 3 minutes for our
Okay.
public comment. And we didn't even start the timer for about 3 minutes. So you're going on about 5 or 6. So if you
Okay.
please just wrap up your comments. please.
Yes, ma'am. In short, all I'll say is whatever positive
Mhm.
steps that come forward to this board, please support them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for being here and taking the time to share your comments. We appreciate that. Seeing no other comments in the room, we'll go ahead and go online.
Madam Chair, there are no public comments online.
Okay, thank you. Then I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Mr. Bass. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we stand adjourned. Thank you.